Jean-Roch Coignet's memoirs offer a vivid account of his life as a soldier under Napoleon Bonaparte. He survived the disastrous Russian campaign, but there are more fights to come. Let's begin. The general shared daily news from Paris and the army being assembled. The emperor arrived to join the viceroy, but his expectation was disappointed. The Russians and Prussians advanced rapidly, leaving us undisturbed in our camp. They passed our left unnoticed, reached the emperor, and engaged in battle. When he found himself attacked, he prepared his defences and simultaneously sent an aide-de-camp at full speed to inform Prince Eugène of the encounter. Eugène flanked the enemies, forcing them to retreat on the road to Lutzen. The army continued its march towards Leipzig, with Marshal Ney's corps as the vanguard. On May 2nd, the memorable Battle of Lutzen took place, credited to the French infantry and notably to our young conscripts' bravery, despite the absence of cavalry. The determination of our troops was incredible. In front of Lutzen, young boys and girls carried all the wounded. At least 30 couples moved from the city to the battlefield, returning with their burdens only to set out again. I witnessed this commendable act, which should not go unmentioned. These boys deserved laurels, and the girls crowns. As for the army's baggage, I organised it according to orders received, with a strong elite gendarme escort and all the hunters. The emperor would notify me to rejoin him in the evening. I always formed a square, with all horses inside, and the wagons so closely arranged that the enemy couldn't penetrate. On May 8th, the army entered Dresden around noon. On the 12th, the emperor met the King of Saxony returning from Prague, where he had taken refuge, and escorted him to his palace to the sound of bells and cannon fire. Before reaching Dresden, I was ordered to guard the bridge crossing with my gendarmes, allowing only the staff baggage and the canteens belonging to the corps. Everything else was unhitched immediately, and the horses set aside. It was curious to see the officers and sergeant-majors on horseback. I made these gentlemen dismount. Thus I had fully equipped horses, not to mention oxen-drawn wagons. I sent 200 horses to the artillery for selection. The cavalry received the rest, and the oxen went to the Grand Park. The Jews offered me gold to take them, but I quickly dealt them a flat sabre blow on the back. Take that to the kitchen. I performed my duty so well that it drew attention in Minister Prince Berthier's office, my General Monthion present. This old grognard makes everyone walk, he said. Indeed, my prince, but he sends the horses to the artillery. Well, I appoint him captain in the Emperor's general staff, and he will continue his duties. That evening, I returned to the hotel with my gendarmes near my general. He laughed. Well, did you have a good day? Yes, my general, I sent good horses to the artillery. Let's have dinner. And at the table he said, Captain, we will ride tomorrow. But, my general, you say, Captain, yes, here is the minister's letter. He just appointed you based on my report about you. Come and embrace your general. And here is your appointment awaiting your service letter. How happy I am. You will always stay close to the Emperor. Try to get Captain Epaulettes immediately. But, General, how? I have given permission to a trimmings maker to set up in the main street. I will find him, if you allow me. Go, my brave. My general, in my joy of being captain, I forgot to tell you I sent back 2 peasants from Lutzen with their wagons and horses. They knelt down. I asked where they were from. From Lutzen, they replied. I told them, well, I grant your request to reward the good deed of the young people of your place who gathered our wounded. You can choose the best wagons in place of yours and take side roads to return home. You owe this to the good deeds of your young people. Did I do well, my general? I will report this to the minister, I praise you, but what about the other wagons? I didn't burn them. I left them for the city's benefit. That's my conduct, General. I took responsibility. You did well. The next day, I appeared at the table with my beautiful epaulettes, which cost me 220 francs, and beautiful tassels on my hat. Ah, that's splendid, they said. They are absolutely Guard epaulettes. On May 19th, the Emperor moved in front of Bautzen and prepared for a battle. On May 20th, cannon fire began at noon and lasted 5 uninterrupted hours. 2 hours later, the battle resumed on a larger scale. On May 21st, the enemy retreated at 6 in the evening. On May 22nd, at 4 in the morning, the army marched to pursue the enemy. The Russians were overwhelmed by Latour-Maubourg's cavalry after a deadly combat. General Bruyère had his legs shattered by a cannonball. As we pursued the Russians on the main road, 2 cannon shots fired from our right. The Emperor stopped and told Marshal Duroc, "Go see." They reached a height, and the Marshal was struck by a cannonball. By ricochet, the accompanying general engineer died instantly. Duroc survived only a few hours. The Emperor ordered the guard to halt. The Imperial quarters tents were pitched in a field to the right of the road. Napoleon entered the Guards Square and spent the evening there, seated on a stool in front of his tent, hands clasped, head bowed. We stood around him without moving. He kept a sombre silence. "Poor man," said the old grenadiers, "he has lost his children." As night fell, the Emperor left the camp, accompanied by Prince Neuchâtel, Duke of Vicence, and Dr. Even. He wanted to see Duroc and embrace him one last time. Back at the camp, he walked alone in front of his tent. No one dared approach him. We stood around, ears lowered. An armistice was concluded on June 4th. The Emperor immediately returned to Dresden, actively preparing for a new campaign. On August 10th, the armistice ended. On the 12th, Austria announced joining the coalition. The coalition armies totaled over 800,000 combatants. Our forces didn't exceed 312,000 men. Several engagements, costing the enemy 7,000 men, occurred on August 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. The Emperor received urgent news from Dresden, forcing him to return hastily. Marshal Gouvion Saint-Cyr's corps was solely responsible for Dresden's defence. The coalition, unaware of Napoleon's return, attacked on August 26th at 4 in the afternoon. The enemy was repelled, losing 4,000 men and 2,000 prisoners on the first day. The French lost about 3,000 men, including 5 wounded guard generals. On the 27th, an attack was ordered. Despite torrential rain, our soldiers' momentum was undeterred. The Emperor oversaw all movements, his guards stationed on our left, unable to exit the city without facing a redoubt defended by 800 men and 4 cannons. It stood 100 paces from the enclosure's palisades. Time was of the essence. Their shells fell in the city. The Emperor summoned a guard fusilier captain named Gagnard d'Avalon. This brave man presented himself, face slightly askew. "What's with your cheek?" "It's my prune, sire." "Ah, you chew?" "Yes, sire. Take your company and capture that redoubt hindering me." "Enough said. You'll march along the palisades by the flank, then rush on it. Capture it immediately." My good comrade sprinted by the right flank. 100 paces from the redoubt's barrier, his company halted. He dashed to the barrier. The officer holding the bar, seeing him alone, thought he would surrender and didn't move. My comrade pierced him with his sabre, opened the barrier. His company leapt into the redoubt and disarmed the enemies. The Emperor, observing the movement, said, "The redoubt is taken." The rain poured. They surrendered, and my comrade led them back amidst his company. I ran to my comrade. We were from the same company, embraced him, took him by the arm, and led him to the Emperor, who signalled Gagnard to approach. "Well, I'm pleased with you. You'll join my old grognards. Your first lieutenant will be captain, your second lieutenant, lieutenant, and your sergeant major, second lieutenant. Guard your prisoners." The rain fell so heavily that the Emperor's hat slumped onto his shoulders. Once the redoubt was taken, the old guard exited the city and took its battle line. All our troops lined up in low grounds, our right supported by the road to France. The Emperor dispatched us 3 to deliver orders across the line for the attack. I was sent to the cuirassier's division. Returning from my mission, I rejoined the Emperor. In his redoubt, he had a very long telescope on a pivot, constantly observing. His generals also looked through it, while he, with his small telescope, observed the grand movements. Our right wing gained ground, our soldiers controlled the road to France, and the Emperor took snuff from his small waistcoat pocket. Suddenly, looking towards the height, he shouted, "There's Moreau! See him in a green coat, leading a column with the Emperors. Cannoneers to your pieces! Aim! Look through the big telescope! Hurry! When they're halfway up, they'll be in range." The redoubt was armed with 16 guard cannons. Their salvo shook everyone, and the Emperor, with his small telescope, said, "Moreau has fallen!" A cuirassier charge routed the column, capturing the general's escort, revealing Moreau's death. A colonel, captured in the cuirassier charge, was interrogated by Napoleon, in Prince Berthier and Count Montillon's presence. He said the Emperors offered Moreau command, which he refused, saying, "I won't take up arms against my country, but you'll never defeat them en masse. You must divide into 7 columns. They can't withstand all. If one is crushed, others will advance." By 3 in the afternoon, the enemy hastily retreated through nearly impassable defiles. This victory was memorable, but our generals no longer wanted it. I dined with the Grand Staff and overheard all sorts of blasphemous remarks against the Emperor. "He's a," they said, "who will make us all perish." I was stunned, thinking, we're lost. The next day I dared tell my general, "I believe our place is no longer here but on the Rhine, marching rapidly. I agree, but the Emperor is stubborn. No one can reason with him." The Emperor pursued the enemy army to Pirna, but upon entering, he suffered fatigue-induced vomiting, forcing a return to Dresden, where rest quickly restored his health. General Vandamme, on whom the Emperor relied to halt the enemy remnants, ventured into the Toeplitz valleys and was crushed on August 30th. This defeat, along with MacDonald's on the Katzbach and Oudinot's in Graubeeren's plains, negated Dresden's victory. On September 14th, Bavaria's defection directed our forces towards Leipzig, where the Emperor arrived on the 15th morning. On October 16th, at 9 in the morning, the enemy army attacked, and cannon fire erupted along the line. This first day, marked by bloody engagements, left the victory undecided. On October 17th, both armies faced each other without engaging. At noon, the Emperor sent an aide-de-camp ordering me to depart with the household composed of 17 carriages and all the hunters, with the army's treasure and maps. I crossed the city, reaching the battlefield on the left, near a large, well-concealed enclosure. Ordered not to move, I settled there, with pots on the fire. On the next day, October 18th, at dawn, the coalition army initiated again. From my position, I saw the French divisions forming lines on the battlefield. I saw the entire battlefield front. Large Austrian columns emerged from woods, marching in columns on our army. Seeing a strong Saxon infantry division advancing with 12 cannons, I ordered my men to eat their soup and be ready to depart. I galloped to the line, following the division's centre, but they turned their backs on the enemy and fired volleys at us. Mounted so well I reached my post, which I shouldn't have left. Once back I regained my composure and told the hunters, "Mount up immediately and return to Leipzig." 2 minutes later, an aide-de-camp arrived at a gallop. "Leave immediately, Captain! Move behind the river! That's the Emperor's order! Follow the boulevards and the main highway!" I departed, placing the first hunter at the carriage's head. Near the boulevard, I found a cannon piece hitched to 4 horses and 2 soldiers. "What are you doing here?" I shouted. They replied in Italian, "They're dead, the cannoneers. Take the lead of the carriages, I'll save you. Let's go. Gallop, take the lead." I felt proud having this piece open my march. On the first boulevard, I ordered not to be cut off, but there the greatest peril awaited us. Reaching the second boulevard, I approached a bivouac for fire. No sooner was my pipe lit than a shell fell nearby. My horse jumped. I stayed balanced, but then cannonballs ripped through my carriages. A terrible wind blew. I couldn't keep my hat on my head. I grabbed it, threw it into the first carriage. Drawing my sabre and riding along the hitching, I shouted, "Gentlemen hunters, keep your riders steady. The first who dismounts, shoot him. Pistols at the ready. As for me, the first who moves, I'll split his head. We must die at our post if needed. Save our master's carriages." 2 hunters were hit. Grapeshot had taken 2 buttons from one and pierced the other's coat. 10 cannonballs struck my carriages, but only 1 horse was wounded, and we escaped danger at the defile's mouth, flanking the promenades and draining the marsh waters on the city's right side. There, a small stone bridge must be crossed to reach the main highway leading to the Grand Bridge. Ahead, I saw an artillery park blocking the small bridge. I galloped, found the artillery colonel directing his park, approached him. "Colonel, in the Emperor's name, assist me in crossing. Here are the Emperor's carriages, the treasure and army maps. I must lead them beyond the river. Yes, my brave, once we pass, be ready. I'll leave you 20 men to cross the bridge. Here," I said, "is an abandoned cannon piece. I return it fully hitched. Fetch it," he told 2 cannoneers. "I'll take it." I galloped back to my convoy. "We're saved," I told the hunters. "We'll cross. Hitch up." I stayed by the small bridge, my carriages arriving. As soon as my first wagons aligned on the bridge, I told the cannoneers, "Join your pieces," and thanked those brave soldiers. On the Grand Defile, I no longer found the artillery, having galloped to position. I met the army's ambulances commanded by an Emperor's staff colonel, holding the road's middle. My first hunter told him, "Colonel, please give us half the road. I take no orders from you. I'll inform the commanding officer," replied the hunter. "Let him come. I'm waiting." He reported to me. I galloped over. Nearing the colonel, I asked for half the road. "Since you ceded it to the artillery park," I said, "you can shift right. We'll double. I take no orders from you. Is that your final word, Colonel?" "Yes." "Well, in the Emperor's name, shift right now, or I'll force you." I pushed him with my horse's chest, repeating, "Shift right, I tell you." He reached for his sword. "If you draw, I'll split your head." He called for gendarmes who said, "Settle it with the Emperor's quartermaster. That's not our concern." The colonel hesitated. Turning to his ambulance, I ordered, "Shift." Passing the colonel, he said, "I'll report your conduct to the Emperor. Report. I'll wait and leave only after you, on my word." I crossed the Grand Bridge. On the left was a mill, and between a ford where the entire army could pass safely. But the river, deep and steep-banked, became Poniatowski's tomb. I climbed the plateau with my 17 carriages and positioned behind the protective battery. At nightfall, both armies held the same positions as at the battle's start, our troops repelling 4 united armies' attacks. Our ammunition depleted, we fired 95,000 rounds, with barely 16,000 left. Holding the battlefield was impossible, and retreat was necessary. At 8 in the evening, the Emperor left his bivouac for the city, settling in the Arms of Prussia Inn, dictating orders all night. I awaited. He came only the next day, but Count Monthion gave artillery and troop orders. He summoned me. "And your carriages? How did you handle this mess?" "Well, General, the Emperor's household, treasure and maps are safe. Nothing left behind, everything saved, but 10 cannonballs hit my carriages and 2 hunters were lightly wounded." I recounted the defile incident with the colonel. He said he'd report it to the Emperor. "Stay calm," he added. "I'll see the Emperor tomorrow. Let him present. He should be on the battlefield collecting our wounded generals in enemy hands. He'll get a scolding from the Emperor. You were at your post, he wasn't." "But, General, I was harsh. I nearly split his head. If he were my equal, I'd have slashed him. But I always erred in disrespect. I'll handle it. Go, my brave, you won't be punished. The Emperor authorized you, not him." Imagine my relief. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, we saw fires on the battlefield, as all the wagons were being burned and the caissons were being blown up. It was dreadful to see. On October 19th, after a touching meeting with the King of Saxony and his family, Napoleon left Leipzig. He headed towards the boulevards leading to the Grand Bridge in the suburb of Lindenau and instructed the engineering and artillery officers to blow up the bridge only after the last platoon had left the city, with the rear guard expected to hold Leipzig for another 24 hours. However, skirmishers from Augereau on one side and the Saxons and Badeners on the other fired at the French, causing the sappers to believe that the enemy army was arriving, prompting them to ignite the mine. With the bridge destroyed, all means of retreat were cut off for the troops of MacDonald, Lauriston, Renier, and Poniatowski. Poniatowski, despite being wounded in the arm, attempted to swim across the Elster, but met his death in a whirlpool. Marshal MacDonald was more fortunate and managed to reach the opposite bank. 23,000 French soldiers who escaped the carnage in Leipzig until 2 in the afternoon were taken prisoner, and 250 artillery pieces fell into enemy hands. The Emperor arrived at his headquarters exhausted, having spent the night without sleep. He was completely worn out. "Well," he said to Monthyon, "where are my carriages and the treasure?" "Everything is saved, sire. Your guardsman faced a barrage on the promenades. Bring him here." He had a serious confrontation with a colonel. "I know," said the general. "Bring them both here so they can explain." The general recounts the incident. I approached the Emperor. "Where is your hat?" "Sire, I threw it into one of the carriages, and I cannot find it." "Did you have issues on the main road?" "I wanted to double up with the ambulances, and the colonel replied that he had no orders to receive from me." I told him, "In the name of the Emperor, keep to the right." He had done so for the artillery and did not want to yield half the road to me. Then I threatened him. If he had been my equal, I would have cut him down. The Emperor, turning to the colonel, "Well, what do you say? You narrowly escaped. You will be confined for 15 days for leaving without my order, and if you are not satisfied, my guardsmen will settle it with you. As for you," he said to me, "you have done your duty. Go find your hat." This concludes the 12th part of the story. Thank you very much for listening. Please consider subscribing for more episodes.